In this episode of ICS Connects, I'm speaking with Hazel Jackson, and we talk about leadership in times of crisis and what are some of the tools that we can use to really get through difficult times. So listen in and let's explore the future of exchange. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to ICS Connects. I'm here today with Hazel Jackson, the CEO of BIS Group, which is a leadership and learning technology business based out of the UAE. And we're going to talk about leadership in times of crisis and leadership principles in general. Welcome to ICS Connects, Hazel.
Thanks for the invitation.
Hazel, you and I have known each other quite a bit for quite a few years, so I know what you can offer. But today I want to really dive into your wealth of knowledge when it comes to leadership and leadership principles. So for the audience here, can you please let us know a little bit about your personal background and what your business BIS Group is all about?
Fantastic, thank you. Well, I've been in business based out of the UAE for the last 29 years and came here as a kind of a naive, I'm going to build a business 25-year-old a number of years ago, and decided that I loved the role of helping people grow their skills, be it in professional development, in leadership, their ability to be a better person, their ability to perhaps go home, get promoted, be a better father, a better mother, but very much focused on the work-based skills. And so our business is centered around that, and how can we help organizations help their team members become better leaders so they can deliver business results. And we now, as everybody is, use a number of digital tools as well as in-person tools and virtual tools to help organizations do that.
Excellent. Well, I strongly believe in what you do. I had myself a business coach for many years, and I really benefited from that quite a bit. For the listeners to this podcast and video, can you just give us a little bit of an overview? What are some of the major leadership principles that you would say are universally applicable and important?
There's so many, and I think they're constantly evolving, but there definitely are some key principles. Ones I believe in. I'm not saying these are the ones for everybody. The ones I believe in is that as a leader, your role is to try and get the best out of everybody else. It's not about you. It's not about you shining, but it's about you getting more from others. And so one of the assumptions, the mindsets I believe are important, is about believing that other people are smart and can figure things out. And I take that from the great work by Liz Wiseman in a book called Multipliers, this concept that if we believe people are smart and figure things out, we'll have the leadership principle of a bit of patience. Maybe we'll have the principle of a bit more curiosity. Maybe we'll give them a bit more space, and we'll also hold them accountable for those results. I also believe very strongly in changing your leadership style and approach based on the situation and the tasks that people are in. So if I were to look at, Ken Blanchard's classic work around situational leadership and changing your style as a leader to suit the circumstances that an individual and an individual task currently need. So I think core principles now, using some buzzwords that perhaps everybody's using, the ability to be agile, the ability to be flexible, to be relevant, to adapt your style, but most importantly, to have the restraint to make sure it's not always about you.
I would say that's such an important point that you just brought up, and multipliers came to my mind a lot of times this year. And from my perspective, I have to say, in my team this year, we saw so many people rise to the occasion. It was really, really great to see, and really shows how you can actually grow your company even in times of difficulty with a very strong team, and if you let them actually do what they're best at doing.
Absolutely. I think what's fascinating, despite the fact that I have a training business, when we look at research, we know that people do their best learning not when they've got a great program or they're attending a fabulous conference, or they've got this great passion around something, but actually people do their best learning in times of desperation, when they absolutely have to. We've all learnt Teams or Zoom or virtual presenting or multi-skilling with different things that you needed in the last 7 or 8 months because we had to. And there's nothing like a little bit of desperation to drive that learning curve up. So how do leaders positively tap into that, beyond times of crisis is one of the things I think we need to learn from the last year.
I couldn't agree more. Let's talk about crisis. What is it really that would make a leader stand out and excel in a time of crisis? What are some of the tools you need to have and some of the mindset that you need to come in with?
Having run my business it's a great question, Mathias. Having run my business for 28, 29 years, I thought I'd been through a lot. I've done a couple of Gulf Wars here. I've done 9/11. I've done the financial crisis. It's been my hardest leadership year, I'd have to say. I keep saying it's character building. But I think in times of crisis, the most important thing you can be is authentic. I don't think you have to put a brave face on everything. I mean, I know I went through a little bit of a COVID fog where I just couldn't see my way through what was happening. And the only way that I could actually make my way through that was to admit to my team, not just my leadership team, but to my wider team, hey guys, I'm struggling right now. I will get you through this. We will find a way, but I needed to be my authentic self and admit when I was battling. So a little bit of vulnerability. Humble. Once you've got through some of those emotions, obviously we also want to follow somebody who's going to take us through. So I can't get down in the hole and wallow my way through this. So then it was about curiosity. It was about seeking, hunting and gathering for ideas. It was about being totally and utterly open to the different options that we might have rather than relying on previous patterns of what we've done before. So my quick to that won't work, possibly that comes out as an impatient, fast leader, needed to be put on hold. And it needed to be, what are you seeing that I'm not seeing? What are none of us seeing that other competitors are seeing? So I think we needed to go from vulnerability and, authenticity to massive curiosity, and then a desire to experiment. I love Jim Collins' description of this, where he talks about, when you really need to be out there innovating in a time of difficulty, you don't want to be firing cannonballs, and putting all of your eggs in one basket and going for something and then finding out that you missed the target. You need to be firing bullets and then recalibrating if you miss the target, fire another bullet, recalibrate, fire another bullet. Once you've got it right, then fire the cannonball. So I think we needed to be a lot more agile with our experiments and a lot more trial and error in the last, in a time of crisis, and particularly in this last kind of like 9 months.
Those are great points, and I think really helpful in terms of mindset. What are some of these pillars that you need to have that your company is actually ready for a time of crisis? Some of the things you need to do as a leader to prepare to actually not have your ship sink as soon as crisis hits?
Well, I think, wouldn't it be all fantastic if we'd known this one was coming, or any crisis is coming? I even remember in the Middle East when the 2007, 2008 financial crisis hit, we were a good 6 months delayed, and everybody was like, it's not going to impact us. And then sure enough, bang, we were hit like everyone else. So sometimes you see the tsunami heading your way, and you can scramble the troops. Other times you are literally blindsided. So what would I say were important to have in your toolbox? I think being part of networks is crucial. Not just at the time of the crisis when you need them, but really constantly reaching out and having a network of people that you might be able to reach out to in a time of crisis. If nothing else, to realize that you're not the only one. Or to actually figure out what they're doing, just to brainstorm. So some of what I've found really powerful for me is 2 or 3 international networks that I'm part of, different areas and fields, but across the globe. And those regular check-ins at one point every week was kind of like my lifeline for new ideas and hope. So I think that's key. I think because I'm sorry, I just to build on that, I genuinely believe that more brains can solve a problem. And sometimes when you're doing something for the first time and you think you need to figure it out by yourself, you get stuck in a just one way of looking something. When somebody's fresh we would typically call it a rookie, somebody doing something hard for the first time, their natural tendency is to reach out to 5 people or more and ask how they've done it before. So when we're pretty experienced as leaders, we need to realize to prep for crisis, it's okay to reach out and ask for help. It's okay to reach out and say, what are you doing? Wow, that's amazing. And then I'm going to say one other side in crisis. Once you've reached out for help and you've looked at all of those scenarios, I think you then need to sit down with your core team, your core advisors, your business coach, and kind of like go, okay, so what is our course? Because I did find myself a little bit, with envy. Social media these days, forgive me if I'm answering your question a long way, but social media, we all know that it can be quite scary when you start looking at everybody else's, oh, look at their pictures, oh, look at their house, oh, look at what they're doing. And we get a little bit of envy around, and kids are being damaged by this, believing that everything needs to be perfect. Well, I think I found a little bit of that during the crisis of business that we've recently been through in the world. I keep looking at, hey, hang on, how come they're doing so well? They're saying everything's fantastic. Look what they're doing over there. And I started getting a little bit lost in all of the things that we could do to possibly survive the crisis. Almost following everybody else's paths because, maybe I should try this and I should try this and I should try this, a little bit like you do in social media. Maybe I should do this exercise class and try this diet and go to this beautician. And, you're looking at every option available to look as glamorous as the other person does on Facebook. In business, it's the same. We can get lost by all these very many ideas that everybody else is trying. So having been super curious and gone out and sought help and got my networks and asked lots of questions, then needed to come down and say, okay, we can't do everything. What is our right to win? Where do we have brilliance? Where do we add value? We don't have to do everything. We need to narrow down on our core customer. We need to narrow down on our core competencies. And we need to flex those because the world is slightly different right now and moving really fast. But then how do we get focused? And almost switch off the noise of what everybody else is doing, not ignore it, but turn it down so that we could get really, really crystal clear on the path that we are following. And I think that's the hardest thing right now with the amount of noise in the world and, how much access we have. Not that you want to get stuck in a rut, but you've got to be able to keep this ability, again, another Jim Collins term, to zoom in on what you're doing and keep occasionally looking up and zooming out so you can see the horizon and then zoom back in on what you're doing. Long answer, sorry.
No, but it's a great answer and it's so important. And from my own experience this year and the things that I would say that really prepared me for this crisis were, number one, and we discussed this shortly before we started the podcast, is cash.
Yeah, exactly. Cash is king, queen, and all of the other players right now.
And it gives you a bit of freedom to start being creative, because if you're stripped for cash, all the things you said, you can't even get there because you're just trying to go through the basics and try to keep the lights on.
Absolutely. And I think what's really interesting, I always used to say to people, say, Hazel, even my auditors would say, why have you got so much cash in the business? You should do something with it. Yeah. And I always said, I want to have 6 months of operating cash because you never know what's going to happen in the world. Yeah. Now, I didn't have a crystal ball. I wasn't Bill Gates. I wasn't figuring out when there was going to be a crisis. I just liked to sleep well at night.
Couldn't agree more.
That's absolutely key. Yeah. And if nothing else, we all need to learn from that. Even in our personal lives right now, I think, certainly in the UAE, there's a lot of people that have lost their jobs. There's a lot of people that have been put on unpaid leave. And, we don't have, perhaps because we aren't paying the taxes, we don't have the government support that's then been coming in saying we'll cover all of those salaries. So there's a lot of people that haven't had an income for a number of months or a reduced income. How much cash did they have in the bank? How well were they saving? So I think this isn't just a company philosophy. I think this is a individual philosophy that people need to have. How have you learned from this crisis, if you have been impacted, and planned for future ones so that you can also do your best work, even if perhaps you're under a little bit of pressure from a financial perspective?
Couldn't agree more. And then the second part that you just mentioned that helped me so much as well was call it the brain cache, like my network. It was so important to really get to that when you're going through it. And you're right. I mean, sometimes you just want to know others are in the same position as you are. And it already gives you this feeling of I'm not alone in this. And that's good enough sometimes.
Yeah.
And last but not least, I'm going to talk about that a little bit still, is the team. Just people that are smarter than me was really good, because it was important to have people around that knew how to do things that I didn't even knew we needed yet, right?
Well,
So
exactly.
because you change your business model.
You also discover, there's something we talk about, native genius, in the Multipliers book. How do you find out what people do easily and freely? And there's a great exercise, you can find it online, under multipliersbook.com, about how do you write a user guide. And we've done this before, and perhaps I hadn't really fully used the tool. But it's like, if you could figure out work on a personal level, what's the best user guide for Hazel Jackson? How best to use me in the organization? What's my highest point of contribution? And if you knew that about every member of your team, it's almost like, I don't read the user guide on most of the gadgets I buy, but if I did, I'd figure out I was only using 5% of its functionality. And that's so similar with the people we have in our team. We don't really know what they're capable of doing. Maybe it's not their job description right now, and the COVID-19 environment and the crisis that has happened with all of these changes have made people have to show, actually, hey, I've also got this in my toolbox that I can do, and I'm also really good at this. And we discovered that about 50% of our organization had to add completely new skills in order to be able to produce and support virtual meetings, not just project manage face-to-face training. And not only did all of the consultants need to learn to present online in the same way and with the same energy and adapt all the work virtually. And I think these user guides around people, if you could do those so you really understand the talent you have in your organization, maybe you don't need to use it all right now, but you need to know it exists. Because boy, that's when you need people to be at their highest point of contribution, when in a point of crisis. And as the leader, you need to give them the space to step up. You need to say, hey, guys, what do you think we should do? And then watch brilliance happen. And that's what I've certainly seen at Biz Group over the last 9 months. Just people come out of this. Oh, I always used to do this, but now I'm doing this as well. And wow, brilliance just happens.
So is that what you recommend in really kind of how you can harvest some of these talents by keeping this open line of communication? Because what I experience as well is you might interview somebody and you might not realize all the skills they have, and you can go back and look at their CV and like, oh, I forgot they have this degree as well. But the other thing is, they work for you 5 years and they might have acquired so many things that you didn't even know in the meantime, skills in other life forms. So how do you keep on top of where your team is? What are your best practices in keeping on top of where your team stands and what their skills are?
I think the onus goes on to the team member, Mathias. I think that the job is they need to keep their user guide up to date. The bigger your organization, it's almost like I should be going into a portal and I should be saying, I'm looking for somebody that's good at X. And, I should be able to search and look for all the user guides that perhaps send me a line with that. If you're a smaller organization, maybe it's at your monthly check-in or your quarterly performance review. You're asking to say, is your user guide up to date? Is there anything that I'm not using you for right now that I should be? Is there anything that that you think we could do differently, and how could you contribute to that? So I think it's questioning, but it's putting the responsibility back on the individual, because let's be honest, learning has become ubiquitous. I can go online now on YouTube and I can search anything, learn how to do something, and somebody will have given me some content. Could be good, could be bad, could be a good thing to do or a bad thing to do, but I can probably learn how to do it. So individuals are off learning all of this stuff all the time. And so as a manager, I think you need to ask the questions. As an individual contributor, I think you need to have a place where you can deposit those updates, even if it's just a running document on Teams that says, oh, I've now added this skill. I've now added this passion. I think that's important, because we need people to weigh in times of crisis. And as a leader, it's sometimes easy to think you have all of the answers, and this is difficult, and maybe it's only going to be you that can figure it out. But you can be absolutely sure that there's many other perspectives that will help you solve this problem, and that's what you need to tap into.
Yes. And I can tell you from my experience this year, the biggest surprises and the best outcomes we saw when we had people veer off templates and procedures. As long as you keep them within templates and procedures, creativity really goes down. Yeah. And that's a big danger, actually, that we think we need templates and procedures to protect the company, but it also is a very limiting factor. Sorry.
Really great point. I think one of my things here was being really clear all the time on why we're doing something. So I'm over communicating, some of the challenges and being authentic, but I'm also in each of the stages making sure I'm saying why it's important that we do this right now. I don't know how to get there, but the why is clear. And so everybody else needs to figure out the how. I think that was key for me as well.
Yeah. Very Simon Sinek. Start with why.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then that's, just, hey, if you think you haven't got a network, if you're somebody out there going, well, that's great, Hazel, you've been in business 28 years, and Mathias, you've got global network of people. Maybe you'd say, I don't have a network to reach to. Well, here's also my network behind me. It's a network of brilliant thought leaders and gurus. If you don't like to read, watch them on YouTube. If you don't want to, so I think we all have a network. It's just, it might be different and how we tap into it.
Yes. And I agree. And I also think the problem that we sometimes have when we try to build networks, and I was there, and probably you too, when you were 25, because I started my company as well, or I took over when I was 24, 25. You're trying to build a network with people that are already up here. You're trying to build a network with people that are very experienced, and they are not very willing to include you in their network because they already have an existing network. I found it much more beneficial to have a network of peers, of people that were on my level, my age group, my level, whatever it was in that sense. And now all those people are business owners as well, and we've risen up together, right? So we have the same experience. But I very often feel people that yearn so much for having a network of people they can look up to. Sometimes they get very disappointed, and it's not always so important to have people that already made it. Just people that are on the same journey as you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really great life lesson. And when I first started my business, as when you did, Mathias, I think I might be a few years on you.
Yes, you.
There wasn't Zoom. I think I was even starting with a fax machine. So there wasn't that much technology. So I could make a phone call, which is why I didn't have that aspirational network. Those were my authors in books. That was my aspirational network. That was access to brilliant minds.
Correct.
And you're right. My in-person network was people who were going through the same journey as me.
Correct. I think it's so important. Hazel, this might be a very difficult one, and feel free to say no answer to that right now. But if you look at something like the meetings industry right now, there's a certain moment of where you just have people at this level where the frustration is just too big, and there is kind of like there's no long-term vision. And we have that from clients. Sometimes it's also the staff, and as a leader we need to keep going with that ongoingly, like keeping people on board and making sure everybody joins us on a journey, be it client, be it staff, be it stakeholders. How can we really go about this, and how can we keep ourselves focused with all this negative input that might be coming our way, and how can we make sure we keep ourselves focused but also give focus to others around us?
I think I've only got two pieces of information. This is your area of expertise or the industry. I think the first one is to look for hope stories. Throughout the world, there will be clients having engaging meetings. There will be, I believe you had a meeting in Singapore last week in person. There will be stories of a rekindling of people coming back together and clever ways of doing that, and hybrid stories. And without kind of like, again, going back to this, oh, it's all right for them, they're doing everything fantastic. I think you need to have the occasional hope story. And I'd maybe even include that in a weekly kind of ritual. All right, let's find one hope story from around the world this week that really showed us that, the world will come back, and meetings will come back. And even if they don't come back as we know them, Jim, they'll come back in some other format. So I think that's important. The second piece for me is to reach outside of your industry. Again, sometimes we become very tunnel visioned. So I was always, Vern Harnish is another guy. And one of the things he would always say, when you're looking for inspiration, go to an exhibition that is not in your industry. Go to something that's not even connected, to look at how they might be handling things differently. And I would be doing the same thing. I would be saying, go out of the meetings industry. What's happening in automotive? Not for meetings, but how are they engaging with their customers? Maybe what's happening with the online retailers? What are they doing to engage with their customers? What's happening in hospitality? What's happening in other industries around you? Not saying you're going to be able to have a cookie cutter, I can take this and put this here. But just maybe there'll be a gem of an idea inside there that you'll go, oh, actually, I could take that little bit and apply it to our industry. And that gives me a new way of looking at something. So I think between hope kind of like sessions and really exploring the outer boundaries of where the meeting industry might go, where human desire to connect with other people is ultimately leading. People want to do that. And so I think if you just keep a broad perspective, I think you'll be really ready for when the meeting industry does come back. And inshallah, we have a vaccination and everybody's feeling great, and whatever other crises hit us, we're well prepared. We have this kind of like armory of fresh ideas that we might be able to apply that make us differentiated from the competition.
Yeah, it's good advice. On that note, as we move forward, do you have any final pointers and advice to the listeners on how we build better and more resilient companies, or anything else that we left out today?
I think never underestimate the importance of your entire organization understanding how a business works. So, I think when we talked a little bit about having enough cash, and I think as owners of a business, that's our accountability to make sure we have that safety net. But as individuals in a business, I think everybody needs to understand how the business works, not just what we deliver to customers, but how costs build up, how gross margins work, business acumen. Because I think for me, when the crisis hits, if you're then having to educate everybody on, hang on a second, this is actually how the company makes money, and this is where we spend money, and these are our biggest cost lines, it's in a time of desperation. And so, I think business acumen, understanding across the organization, so everybody understands how what they do impacts how your business operates, and they get the connections. I think that's a really good preparation foundation that everybody needs to have. And then I think the final piece for me right now is an ultimate measure. I'm saying to all of my clients, how many learners do you have in the business? And who are your learners? And by that, I mean, who's able to pick something up. Maybe they learn it from YouTube, maybe they learn it from a workshop, maybe they learn it from a colleague, but they are open and willing to learn something new so they can multi-skill, but more importantly, so they can reskill and so they can adapt. And I don't know what they have to reskill and adapt to for 2022, 25, 2030. I just need to know, have I built the resilience in my team to be learners? Because if they're learners, then we can teach them whatever they need to know. If they are stuck in the way they've always done something and resistant to learning or resistant to trying new things, or even in part of the Asian culture, resistant to losing face by making some mistakes as they try something new, then we're going to be very hard to reskill those people. So build learners would be my ultimate goal moving forward.
That is a wonderful sentiment to leave it on. Hazel, this has been fantastic. Lots of food for thought, definitely for me. I'm pretty sure for listeners as well. Thank you so much. Just to let everybody know as well, Hazel's company, BIS Group, is really available for leadership training, helping leaders out, but also helping your team and lots more. So I'm pretty sure
having some fun, inshallah, at some point as well.
Exactly.
Fun learning. Not all about desperation.
No. We there will be a time after this, and we gotta
absolutely fantastic.
Learn that too. Excellent. Thank you so much, Hazel. Really appreciated it.
It's been my pleasure.
And thanks everyone for listening.